friends. So glad you're tuning in to this episode of Living in the Meantime. And I'm so happy to be welcoming the Reverend Marcella Gillis into the conversation. And of course, our old friend Brandon Batson, the producer of this program, is with us and will be participating as well. Hello to both of you. So glad you're here. I look forward to this conversation. Marcella is a person of great integrity, a very special person that I've come to know since relocating up in the Hudson Valley. She is the rector of the local church that's just maybe 5 minutes from where I live. And it's the church that Melissa and I have been attending since we've been living full time up here. And we found a congenial environment at this church, a church that is unusually capable and competent for a small town experience. And Marcella has proved to be a very capable and competent rector for this congregation. And I thought I would invite Marcella into a conversation because it's that season of the year. You know, it's Christmas time. And while I'm not always focused on religious issues per se, given the nature of this season, it seemed appropriate that I have a conversation with someone about what the hell is going on during Christmas in 2025. And what does it mean to be living in this season at this time as a Christian, perhaps, and all the related matters. We'll see where this conversation takes us, Marcella. But I'd like you first to start by telling my listeners who you are, who you think you are, anyway.
It's a good way to phrase that. Hi, I'm Marcella. Who do I think I am? I am an Episcopal priest. I'm the rector here in Stone Ridge. Let's see. I have a fabulous wife who is also a priest, and also an ethicist and a theologian. So our dinner table conversations are very intense most of the time.
Are you in agreement most of the time?
Thankfully, yes. I
Yes.
think we'd say we're usually reading the same book, but often find ourselves on different pages.
Yeah.
She grew up very heavily Roman Catholic, and I grew up very hippy-dippy, sort of rainbow Protestant. So we have, a lot that overlaps and a lot that doesn't. And we just had a baby in July. So I'm having a lot of my own kind of recalibration around what Christmas is for me, beyond just my church life and my professional and vocational sphere, but figuring out what it means now that I have a kid. And both of us having a lot of conversations about how we want to navigate this season, in light of what that changes for us. And yeah, I think that's, most you need to know about me. I mean, really important is that I really, really, really love food and cooking and aesthetics, and I like things to be really beautiful. And so that's really important to me this time of year. And so I don't know, that just feels like an important thing to add, that those are my priorities are located in the kitchen and at the altar, I think.
That's good. So, gosh, a lot has been going on, right? Both nationally as well as locally. And I'd love for you to pick up some themes that are relevant to you right now that pertain to what does it mean to be living in the meantime in these days. I did do a brief podcast on the matter of your support of Ali, who was an Afghan refugee. And maybe why not pick up the pieces of that story? You can refresh my listeners what the background of that is and how it's related to who you are, what you believe is fundamentally right and true, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to refresh the background, um, this parish, and part of why I'm here, as I aforementioned, is a big food and feeding centric place. It's a big part of our identity, and how we understand our discipleship has a lot to do with cooking and eating and feeding. We have a beautiful commercial kitchen here and are always looking for opportunities to make it available and of service to the wider community. And a component of that for the past couple of years has been working with this fabulous family of refugees from Afghanistan who have resettled locally here in the Hudson Valley. And we do a monthly dinner where they all come and cook, and folks come from all over the place and do carry out. And it's been such an incredible experience for all of us. Unfortunately, what happened in October is one of the sons of this family, Ali, um, who was the only family member who hasn't yet um, sort of finished all of his, immigration paperwork, or his asylum paperwork, got taken into custody by ICE when he was showing up for a routine hearing as part of his asylum process. And he, since October, has been imprisoned at Delaney Hall here in Newark. And so we've been rallying in sort of every way that we can, me as a priest and us as a church, just working with anyone who we can, along with the support of our bishop and our diocese here in New York, to get him released. It's a horrific situation. There's no reason for him to be in prison. He's just this incredible guy. And so it's just been awful, really, really awful. And part of the beauty of it has been sort of seeing how much support we're getting from the wider community and even from our local and state politicians, and how invested folks are in trying to get him released. But it's also been really demoralizing. In fact, in spite of having so much support and so many folks behind it, that his case hasn't really budged. He has a great legal team. So even in spite of that, it's just been a really difficult couple of months. So we're all struggling, especially his family. And so, all of this for us ties into, they're Muslim. They're not members of the church per se, but they're community members. And we're, you know, continually trying to understand, sort of, as Christ the King, as this parish in this community, we have our sort of core group of church members, but we also are learning what it means to incorporate the wider community into our community, and how that works, because there are so many different people using our space and whose values align with ours and who we want to be in collaboration with. And so this is one of those things where a lot of members of our church feel really passionate about immigration justice, and also feel really connected to this particular family. So it's been an instance of kind of many of us being very aware of this happening in the wider community and in the country, and feeling really upset about it, and then having this experience of it really landing at our doorstep in a very profound and disturbing way. And so it's been mobilizing and energizing, to say the least.
Yeah, it strikes me, in conversation with people who are distressed about current conditions, culturally, nationally, internationally, a lot of expression of powerlessness. People wondering, what on earth can I do? How can I live into the values that I espouse? And it struck me, and one of the reasons I thought of inviting you to have a conversation is that Christ the King is living into those values in a way and offering opportunity for people to participate, specifically, tactically, uh, in helping deliver good ends or making good ends. And I'm assuming, well, tell me how you make sense of that out of your own sense of vocation.
It's kind of a no-brainer to me. I would say that my religious beliefs reinforce my inherent values as a person of the world, Um, so I'm really grateful to be part of a religious tradition that I like, that I really understand. It gives a lot of clarity and a lot of language about what it means to be in relationship with people who are not like us, or like you, or what it means to sort of share space together. and what it means to offer hospitality. I mean, that's undergirds sort of my ethic as a person. So in terms of this particular situation, I feel like the roadmap is laid out for me. I don't, everything I can use, I can draw on the Bible, I can draw on parts of our tradition. It's all there. And that I'm really grateful for. It feels nice to have the weight of the tradition, the way I interpret it, to have that sort of behind us in this moment. It feels very grounding in a time where I also feel very powerless. Um, and, I think this particular situation certainly speaks to a kind of a wider thing that many of us are experiencing, is like powerlessness on a much wider level, but also in the face of really profound transition and change, which is, I think, what we're experiencing as a country, as a culture, as a people. I just think we're in a kind of a major paradigm shift right now.
From what to what?
Well,
I mean, I
um,
agree with you. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm curious how you would describe that.
yeah, I want to be precise with my language as I describe that, and I could also go real cosmic with it because I do think it's big. Um, but
Well, you
I
can do both. You can do both. Feel free.
I so yeah, I think like the language that I have that I feel really drawn to is from the language of Advent, which is the liturgical the church season that we're in, which comes before Christmas. And the Advent is a period of transition, it is of waiting, it is of acknowledging that a really profound shift is taking place or about to take place. And so it does have very apocalyptic undertones. And when I use that word, I mean apocalyptic in sort of the original Greek sense in terms of unveiling. So dynamics that have been at play for a really long time are being revealed in new ways. Um, and it's really uncomfortable. And I feel that for myself as sort of a overeducated, upper middle class white lady, um, a good liberal white lady, just coming to the realization in so many ways that the world that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. And reckoning myself to that and reconciling myself to that, and also just um, trying to do the work of catching up, because that reality has been true for a lot of people with less privilege than I have for a really long time. And it's taken me a long time to kind of have my own eyes be opened in that sense. And so the institutions that long protected me or helped me or that I trusted in, and I'm talking, yes, politically, but I'm talking in terms of, all of the ways that our society is structured, the systems, the communities, the organizations that I put a lot of faith in and that helped sort of structure my own worldview, um, I'm realizing are not functioning the way that I thought that they were. And that is very destabilizing to me.
Does that include the church? Did you have
It
a good
definitely,
you had a good experience of quote church growing up? Were you attached or?
yeah, I mean, I had a great experience growing up in church. But my mom is a pastor. She was like in some of those first cohorts of women getting ordained in the 70s. Um, And so I was lucky to grow up. I grew up in California, very progressive space, very open-minded. I was really lucky that I grew up without any religious trauma, and I grew up in a church setting that was very nurturing. That being said, I grew up in a branch of Christianity in that particular time and place that was not very interested in engaging with the sharper edged parts of the story and of the tradition.
Mhm.
And I think that was due to older generations of folks who had been traumatized by, as many folks have, by the faith or the way it's was practiced for them growing up. So I grew up in a very um, softened, sanded off, I think, version of Christianity. And so part of my own faith journey has been learning to engage with actually how difficult and how complex this faith is or can be, and learning to really appreciate the parts of the story, including Christmas, that are difficult and not soft and smushy and easy and cute. And so that's been a huge part of my own growth. And again, something that I'm drawing a lot more inspiration from these days, and I'm finding a lot more comfort from these days.
Do you find that the congregation can go the distance with you in this way? Or do you find any pushback? And I know that there's a good congenial atmosphere at the church. I'm not looking to create any problem. I'm talking about you though, as a person walking with people. Are they coming along for the ride?
I hope so. I hope so. I think so. I'm very aware as a pastor and especially as a preacher that folks are gonna pick up what they want to pick up, and they're gonna hear what they're ready to hear.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm always trying to walk the line of what it means to lead with honesty, but also with compassion. And so I'm always trying to be really truthful and tap into sort of that prophetic voice, um, while also a huge part of my job is just caring for the folks in my cure. And I take that really seriously too. And so trying to strike that balance is hard. And there are people here who are like 100% here with me, on board, same page, and a lot of them who aren't. And that's how, of course, it's community. We're all going to
Sure,
be,
sure.
that's why we do this together, because we're not
Yeah,
all in the same place at the same
yeah,
time. And this gives us a space to kind of work through myself included, to work through
sure,
some of that. I don't need everyone to be exactly where I am.
sure, sure. You know, when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, Melissa and I were just having this conversation. It's very clear to us that the world we grew up in is no longer, and that it was kind of a real bubble coming out of World War II in which we were raised and nurtured, and it created a kind of mythos that was larger than the actual experience. And I think that there's a lot of nostalgia for a recreation of the mythos within our culture. And I understand it because I feel the strands even within myself. From time to time, I kind of long for something had experienced as a child in the community in which I grew up, where the schools, and I was a musician growing up, and the school Christmas season always included hymns and carols and so on, and on the radios it was all hymns and carols and so on. In the secular, I say secular media, it was all the same, and there was a kind of a coherent bubble of expression of those kinds of values. Now, of course, underneath that mythos, things weren't what they appeared to be. But in the main, there was a thing that kind of lasted for several decades, and then it kind of broke down in the late 60s. And we're now emergent now in the 2020s in a very different place and time. But the other thing that strikes me is that as I've gotten older, I've become more and more deeply aware that there are perennial values that undergird our human existence, that cut across religious lines, racial lines, and any line that would normally separate us one from another. Undergirding our human experience, things like that you've been pointing to, things like the common good, that we're all in this together, no matter who we are. Um, I just, it's a moment of rediscovery, I think. Do you see it that way? In other words, to some degree, I see the current time frame peeling the onion, as it were,
Mhm.
on what are the essential matters that really bind us together.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Oh my God. Yeah. I think about this
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah.
every day, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm assuming that you have friends who are Jewish,
Yeah.
And you have these kinds of conversations. You may have rabbi friends, you may have none. And of course, you have Muslim friends, as we know, within the community. And how are you finding the cross-cultural conversation on these matters? How is that working out?
Always, I guess I wouldn't even say surprised, but the way that we most often end up saying the same thing in different words is, um, again, surprising, but extremely not surprising when you think about it, you know?
Right.
Um, I think we're, especially, in terms of the Abrahamic faith, we are all kind of undergirded by some of the same values, although they're expressed differently and emphasized differently. When we do have those conversations, we're all coming together at the end of the day for the sort of same things, especially as how those values kind of manifest in the here and the now and what's happening in front of us. So a lot of that has happened through this situation of calling for Ali's release, is that's been a widely interfaith effort. Um, and it is not just for him, but across the board in terms of all different folks from all different faiths who are using their traditions to undergird the argument for why this shouldn't be happening at all. Um, so I'm always heartened by how much we have in common.
Right. Although there are versions of each of those traditions that espouse the opposite, that they are the truth, they are the way, they know, right? It's kind of makes it a very complicated agenda for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really hard to hold space in a pocket of a tradition that has so many different ways of being approached and interpreted. Like there are so many Christians that I don't have anything in common with, and I'm not sure we're doing the same, I'm not sure we're practicing the same religion at all. And so that's part of what it means to sort of inhabit this faith as an identity too, is to reconcile with the fact that there's a lot of repair work that needs to be done. There's a lot that's been done on our behalf and in our name that I don't want to claim. So it's a lot of extra work on top of how hard it is to even be a Christian at all right now.
Right. Are you in conversation with people who are radically different in expressing their Christianity than yourself?
Not anymore. I'm finding for the most part those are not conversations that I'm really interested in expending a lot of energy around. I have a lot of conversation with folks who are moving away from those sort of corners of the faith, and are looking to sort of heal and find some more expansive understandings. But I'm not really interested in debating, like, about the Bible. Like, should it be taken literally or not? Like, that's been done. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
don't need to. It's just not how I want to use my energetic resources at this time. I don't know.
So how do we hold space for these differences in our communities and so on?
No, and I'm feeling a change in myself in terms of how I'm answering that question. Um, and I'm noticing myself answering that question differently these days when it does come up, and it does frequently. And I think I came from a place where I wanted to be very, and this is true, I think, of a lot of sort of mainline progressive Christians, where it's like, we want to make sure that there's space for everybody and everybody gets to believe whatever they want to. And that was sort of also just a part of my like idyllic 90s upbringing and sort of postmodern, whatever you want is fine. I
Under
don't feel that.
tolerance, we're all going to tolerate
Like,
everything.
everybo's totally, whatever it is totally fine. Um, and I married an ethicist. I don't feel that way anymore. Um, and I'm watching sort of the damage that kind of narrative can also do, where I'm really not interested in holding space for narratives that are hurtful or exclusive or damaging. And that doesn't mean folks can't hold on to whatever beliefs they have. But I think as a progressive Christian, we've lost a lot of ground trying so hard to overcompensate for the exclusive parts of our tradition that I think we lose track of how important it is that we really name what we are about and what our values are and what is important to us. Um, and that's something I'm trying to do with some more clarity these days, even though it goes against my instincts of being like, well, I don't want to be exclusive. Um, but I do think to participate in this well, you have to agree to some really clear standards about how we treat each other, what we believe about the world, how we believe we're supposed to interact with one another and with the planet, you know? At the end of the day, we do have to have there have to be some hard lines that we toe. And that's something that I'm still learning how to do well.
I had a conversation about a month ago with the former president of Carleton College, Steve Boscancer, who just came out with a book that is about how colleges ought to respond to disagreements, political and otherwise. And I had asked him in the course of our conversation, would he have allowed Nick Fuentes to be on campus? And he gave a good answer. It was nuanced. Um, but it begs the question of, to your point, okay, so we don't espouse what Nick Fuentes espouses, but does Nick Fuentes have a right and an opportunity to say what he thinks, in a context? It's sort of like that. And, as time goes on, I'm becoming increasingly alert to how that sort of a question also reverberates within local communities. How do we negotiate this going forward? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, yes, and no, yes, and I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's um because it is so nuanced. It is so particular. Um, but again, like what I am increasingly aware of and wanting to be more careful about is um, I'm not gonna speak on anyone's, like, First Amendment rights. At the same time, to to be always playing the game of both sides, I think is not serving us particularly well in this moment. And I do think that there's a time and a place for, um, healthy debate and disagreement and coming from different places. Um, but when we're talking about fascism, I don't know that I need to have, an op-ed about both sidesing that kind of stuff or racism. You know what I mean? Like I'm finding myself in a position of like, okay, so I have the same question that you do, Steve. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in charge of a college right now, to be honest.
Yeah. Uh, well, one of my responses is that just as Christ the King sponsors um, a food bank and has responded to the community needs, um, and that brings together a whole constellation of people. And that whole constellation of people probably represents a great gamut of opinion about many things, but they are nevertheless gathering around a common cause of helping those who need help, right? I mean, that's one way we address it, isn't it? I mean, that's one way we get at it.
Yeah.
And
I think like I so value church truly in being one of sort of the few cultural spaces right now where that can exist, where we're never all going to agree. We certainly do not all get along with each other. um, and yet we are bound by some really specific values that are named clearly and consistently enough that that's what we all are able to come together around. But when it comes to how those are manifest or how we make them happen or what it looks like in the world around us, we feel really differently about that. And I really like having a place where that's true, so we can have that experience of what it means to be in conflict, to be in disagreement, to struggle with what it means for all of us to sort of rally around something. But to have a safe space where that can happen, where there's social infrastructure for it, where there's narratives and script and story that helps us navigate those kinds of conversations. It's really valuable to me. I think it's like all of the theology and the religious stuff aside, even just the mere structure of what a parish or a church looks like right now, if it's
yes,
functional, is like I just am holding on to for dear life because I actually feel like this is kind of the way through.
yeah. Yeah, I know we're probably all tired of talking about how the institutional structures of our common life have been falling into decrepitude over the last number of decades, starting with that seminal book, Bowling Alone, some decades ago. But ever since, it's only gotten much more apparent and much more chronically a problem that we don't have spaces for our common life. And of course, then there's the whole exacerbation of the internet and now AI. Speaking of which, what do you think the role of this is in our common life? To the, what are you talking about with your ethicist spouse about these matters?
When we're talking about AI, let's see. My wife is certainly coming at it from the perspective of a college professor.
Mm,
So she's got that lens. I think
interesting.
when I'm talking about it, I feel very focused on the environmental and social impact lens. And that doesn't even get to the sort of the broader ethics of what it even means to use technology like that in terms of our humanity and what it does and doesn't do or can and can't do. Um, so when we talk about that, that's usually where we're watching our own institutions struggle with what it means to incorporate or not that technology.
Do you use it?
No,
Not at
like
all.
me, nope, never.
You
At least
don't
when I can opt out of it, I don't. I
you
don't
don't
even
use
know
it
it.
for research?
I don't use it for anything. I turned it off
No?
on everything that I can. I have special Chrome extensions that block it when you Google search.
Wow.
I personally feel really, really strongly about not using it. I wish I could opt out of it more, but obviously they make it really difficult to do that. So when and where I have the option to not use it, I don't.
And that's because it's trace the your values bring you there.
Yes.
What are those values that bring you to that space?
Part of it is intellectual. Um, and how I want to use my brain and my education and my skills and my time. And I don't want that outsourced in any way. My sort of intellectual integrity is really important to me. Um, as a priest, as a writer, as an artist, um, I feel really strongly about the profound environmental impacts of what it means to run these data centers and how much water they use, where they're being built and placed, the environmental damage they're doing to the communities around them, often are lower income, black, um, you know, communities that they're doing a lot of damage to. Um, so those are kind of the biggies for me, although there's plenty of other things I could probably list, but those are my big ones.
How about how it impacts our social universe? You have
Yeah, I
thoughts
mean,
about that?
yeah, I again, I feel odd about outsourcing social interaction, which is what it feels like it's doing frequently. And I never thought I was going to be a Luddite, and here I am. And I went back and read about them actually, and was like, oh, I get where you were coming from. I understand. When this kind of technology is just like taken and run with the way that it has without any thought or ethics or restrictions, it feels really dangerous in a time where we're already struggling with um, what it means for anything to be true or real. And I don't want to participate in anything that's blurring reality as it exists now. And that's what it feels like it's doing. I don't think that's good for human relationships, just period. I think what carries us through times of change or whatever it is that we're living through now is relationship, is community, is each other. And I feel like I'm watching AI be just another dynamic of something that severs those kinds of relationships and those kinds of critical connections between humans and between the environment.
And now you're a new mother.
Yeah.
And I guess you and Meg have to be wondering about, I know you're probably not sleeping well enough to have too many thoughts, 10 years from now or 20 years from now. But even so, Lydia's going to be growing up in a vastly different world than you guys did. And I'm wondering, What are you thinking about that? What are you thinking about?
We were just talking about this last night. Meg
Yes.
told me that I guess Lydia, this is the first year, I guess, that's kicking off a new, generation, 2025, and they're calling Generation Beta, I guess.
Right. Right.
Um, which that's not something I've been tracking because I've been, keeping a
Busy.
child alive. um, and yeah, it's tough for me because I don't wanna raise her in a bubble, and pretend like these things don't exist. I also know that for raising kids, anything that is sort of forbidden or that you're deprived of just becomes way more tantalizing. I grew up, in hippie Northern California, and I wasn't allowed to have sugar ever. And so when I got to college, can I tell you that I only ate Cap'n Crunch for, like, the first 2 years of college. I don't wanna, like I feel very conscious of not wanting to create those kinds of cycles in her life, where people are so strict about screen time and what that kind of means. So I want her to have a very integrated experience. That being said, there are just some parts of sort of modern life that I'm not interested in participating in or not interested in, supporting or feeding into.
Yeah.
And she's going to be raised by us, so that will be I'm grateful to be living here. I feel um in this sort of pocket of the Hudson Valley. I feel like I'm in very good company with folks who are on different pages, but certainly aware of the same dynamics and um, want to be raising kids in a place that feels community oriented and also very aligned with the natural world feels really important too. So we moved here because we felt like this would be a place we'd want to have a kid.
Right. It's interesting, because as you know, I have two granddaughters who live nearby. And I know this is a topic of conversation among daughter Stephanie's friend group. And it's perplexing
Yeah.
because, on the one hand, the parent wants to prepare their children for what's coming down the pike. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean, what is the nature? What are the parameters of that preparation? It's a very tricky question, isn't it? So
Uh-huh.
important to have that lively conversation going on all the time, I think.
Mhm.
Fortunately for my daughter's friends, they are in that conversation all of the time. And they kind of chew on that. Um,
Same.
but just to kind of putting a couple of these pieces together, we went this past week. I mean, at the end of last week, to my 10-year-old granddaughter's band concert. And, the schools now have a prohibition on cell phones in school, which I think was a very good thing. But what struck me, and Melissa and I talked about this afterwards, there were a whole lot of kids in the band. And it struck us that here was an example of community in action, if you will, and community building. Those kids clearly wanted to be there, and the stage was full. In fact, there were 1,000 clarinets. There were 1,000. It was funny in that regard. But on the other hand, they were into it, and they wanted to be there, and they were paying attention to the conductor, who actually seems to be a really fine educator. And I was thinking, how, where, and how is that kind of context being replicated culturally for our kids? And I suppose it can take place in sports. If you're on a sports team and so on, it can go there. And but there are precious few places where kids are actually given exposure to what it means to be in community with other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the AI and the internet is drawing them away from the actual physical engagement with humans, right?
Yeah.
It's really
I
tricky.
definitely think that about AI, and I have a lot more questions about I think there's a lot more nuance to sort of the internet and social media because I also acknowledge how incredibly important that is and has been for so many people in terms of making connection and communication accessible.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
So it's such a double-edged sword, and so I'm certainly not in the camp of I feel like there's a lot of hype right now about like keeping kids safe on the internet, which I don't actually think that that's what those bills are about and what those messages are about, although certainly I don't, I share those concerns. Um, but it's a really tricky space of how do we acknowledge that those technologies are an important part of our life, but also draw some really intentional boundaries around what it means to utilize them. And how are we investing more of our energy in what it means to be community, with people who
Yeah.
are different from us, who are different ages, who come from different backgrounds. That's something that feels super important to me in general, and now especially with a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're in the season of Christmas. This podcast will likely air Christmas week. Any thoughts, comments? What on that topic, given all that's been going on? I'm just this week, gosh, our hands are full of just bad news.
Yeah.
Hearts and minds are overwhelmed by lots of bad news. And the massacre in Australia, the devastating deaths at Brown University, the stabbing deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife, and these things have kind of leapt up on us all at the same time. But to your earlier point, I'm about Advent, the season of Advent, and in its day and time, things were complicated too, right?
Yeah.
And
I- yeah.
out of that, what's the message to be had in that now?
Um, well, I want to start by saying I liked Christmas a lot more before I was a Christian.
Okay.
I think I got a lot more pleasure out of the season before I became more of a practicing Christian. That doesn't mean it's not really important and I don't value this time, because I really, really do. But it requires a level of spiritual engagement for me that wasn't there when I wasn't doing this from a church lens, because I love all the cultural rituals around it. I love all the accoutrement. I love the smells and the snacks and the, sounds. I do love this time of year. But I've come to really appreciate Advent leading up to it as a time of really, I mean, it's designed to be this sort of time of quiet and reflection and slowing down, which is so impossible given the cultural milieu. Like it's so hard to do. Um, and but in recent years, what I've come to appreciate even more about it is that if you're paying attention to sort of the stories that we're looking at, the texts that we're reading this time of year, they are very focused on what it means to live in times that feel really terrifying and destabilizing. What it means to hold on to hope and have a vision of the future in the midst of tremendous violence, um, and uncertainty, and um, the temples that we rely on crumbling. Um, and so, the way the tradition is shaped around that, I've come to appreciate a lot more.
Yeah.
And I don't get hope from it in the sense that I feel like everything's going to be fine, because it definitely isn't. Um, but I get hope in it in the sense that um, there is a path forward, that there is a way through, that the story doesn't end with destruction. The story can't, the love that comes into the world at Christmas can't be destroyed, can't be killed, is unkillable. And so it's a different kind of hope. It's not a surface hope of don't worry, everything's going to be fine, which most
It's
days I would
not Yeah, it's not optimism.
It's not optimism. It's not, Pollyanna theology. It's not
Right.
any of that, which is way more enticing. And there are a lot of days where I wish that was the message I was able to get from this, but it's not. And so it relies on a much more profound sense of what it means to carry hope through times like these. And it's much harder to do, and it's meant to be done in community. It's not meant to be Hope is not this sort of personal practice that we have in our own heads. It's something that we're just doing together. And that's what keeps me going. And to have a church community that also just happens to be my job is, I don't know what I would do without. I don't know what I would do without this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful, to be doing the work, practicing hope in this season together, sort of in lockstep with so many other wonderful people. It makes all of this seem possible, and it makes the vision that is laid out for us of a world that is defined by peace, true, real peace and justice and love. Um, that's where we're headed. That we're on the journey towards that. Is really important for me. And I can't do that by myself. I don't believe that by myself. I believe that when I'm doing it together with other people.
And it's on that note, we probably should bring our conversation to conclusion. It's a good place to end because I'm with you on this, that the season lends itself to be exactly at the right place at the right time in our cultural moment. That the first Christmas wasn't born in a sweet-smelling hotel. It took place in the messy detritus of the current situation in which it was enmeshed. And here we are. We're enmeshed, and yet, as you say so well, that hope is our ground and what will bring us into the next phase of our lives, right? Thank you, Marcella. Any other thought or final word?
I don't think so. I've probably said more
Okay.
than I needed to on all
No,
fronts. So.
no, it was good. Thanks so much. And here's to a great new year coming out
Amen.
of a wonderful Christmas. All right.
Amen. Thank you
Thanks
both
so
so
much. Yeah. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Living in the Meantime with Stephen Bauman. To stay connected, visit stephenbauman.com for links to like, follow, and subscribe, along with updates on all of Steve's current projects, including Gaining Clarity, his concierge mentorship and coaching service. If you want early access to episodes, reflections, and additional content, be sure to subscribe on Substack. And of course, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you love to listen. We'll see you next week.